The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
It's good to be out of the one-man pod business for a few days. I'm Dan Besbris. He is Adrian Benjamins. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today, a Hoop Ball presentation. Adrian, good morning.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm exhausted, but I'm really trying not to talk about it on the podcast too much. I tell a lot of stories about myself on the show, which I know is to mixed reviews. I think that it's nice to connect with people, let them into my life a little bit. But the one thing that you should never do is make people feel bad. And stories about being tired or sick or bored, that has a way of creeping into the audience's mind. So I'm not going to bitch about it, but I am tired. How are you?
I'm doing good, Dan. Just trying to stay cool. This heat, I'm not meant to run this hot. So this heat's really getting to me, but it's not that bad.
Are you a sweaty man?
Give you hours. Yes.
Yeah, I'm jumping right into the good stuff here, right out of the chute. So am I. But you're not a big dude, are you? You don't look that huge to me.
No. I'm short. I'm 5'8", 160 pounds.
Oh man, you and I could make up the all district like pygmy point guards here. I'm 5'8", $145.
But I run hot, Dan. I can never. You know when you look at these fashion magazines or catalogs and you see like the male model wearing the jacket,
yeah,
with
the
scarf
jacket.
and
Who wears all that
layering? I've never been able to do that my entire life. I can't wear a jacket. Even during winter, I can't wear a jacket. I sweat all the time. It sucks.
Yeah, I'm 100% there with you. And it occurred to me that I sometimes need a reminder that not everyone is like that. And that reminder for me came this weekend. And then we're going to jump right into the fantasy stuff here. I was at my cousin's wedding. Congratulations, Nicole and Mike. It was awesome. But I also realized that I was just drenched. By the way, for kind of a gangly white dude, I actually am pretty good on the dance floor. I got more rhythm than people would think.
Nice.
And so I was just soaked head to toe in my own perspiration. And I was looking around like, hey, are you guys warm? And yeah, people were like, yeah, I'm a bit warm also. They were just warm. And I was like, the back of my neck was a faucet. The groom also luckily happened to be a sweat hog, much like myself. So we were able to give each other a large embrace at the end of the evening and not care. But nobody else would touch me. I couldn't have paid them enough to give me a hug at the end of the night. So yeah, anyway, Adrian and I are sweaty. It's warm in Southern California. It's not that bad, though. We are complaining, but I think between the two of us, we live like a combined 6 miles from the ocean. So we probably shouldn't be complaining too much. It was only like 86 at my spot today. What do I want to do? What do we want to do on today's podcast? First things first, this is, of course, at Hoopball Fantasy, at Dan Besbris, at Adrian Benjamins. If you want to get us on Twitter, rate and review the pod on iTunes. Do it in the podcast app on your Apple-branded mobile device. You go into podcasts, you search for the podcast, you click on the name of the show, not the name of the episode. It's really kind of inconvenient. But then there is a rate and review tab, and we'd love it if you gave us a positive mark. But as I've been saying over the last couple of weeks, and as Adrian and Neil mentioned on Friday's show, and as I hinted on yesterday's podcast, when we've got two men on this program, or two boys, or two whatever, I shouldn't necessarily say men, two people, we're going to talk about more of the fundamental stuff and how it applies to strategizing for a fantasy season. Adrian and I last week, we talked about mock drafts. Adrian, you and Neil got into season prep in a big way. And yesterday on the Monday show, I mostly broke down the Carmelo Anthony trade, but I also talked about, I weighed in on the Hawks portion of kind of what led to the Carmelo Anthony thing, the signing in Houston. And it occurred to me that John Collins was rapidly getting onto my NBA all-hype first team list, and I ended up wanting to talk about it for a really long time. So I thought, wouldn't that be kind of fun to go through some of the free agents so far, or even names that have come as a result of free agency or end-of-season performance last year, and try to figure out who those big movers are going to be that end up being wildly overvalued by draft day. That seems like kind of interesting stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Let's get into it.
All right, so let's just do a quick rehash on John Collins, since he was the guy I talked about on yesterday's pod. I don't want to spend a ton of time on him, but Adrian, I don't know about you. I watch my Twitter feed very closely, and Collins is a name that's been coming up constantly. And almost all of the rankings that I'm seeing of John Collins have him inside the top 50. And that's fine and all, but it feels like it's going to blow out his draft position this year, that people are going to be taking him at 45 by early October. And doesn't that kind of wipe out whatever value you might be able to get on the dude? I feel like you have to be able to get him in the 70s, because then maybe he could exceed his value. But if you're drafting him in the 40s, I don't see him doing any better than that.
Yes. I didn't think he would be considered that high at this point of the off season. In my mind, I was thinking I might be able to get this guy in the 6th, 7th round, but you're absolutely right, Dan. If this guy, if he's being drafted as a top 50 guy, it's zapping all of the value from him. But I do believe he has top 50 upside, Dan. And, he finished, I believe, 69 in 8 cat leagues, and he got off to a slow start last season. This season, I think he's going to come out of the gate at full speed. And everything we've seen in the offseason, I was really nervous about the Hawks going into the draft because I thought they were going to land one of these big men coming in. This JJJ, Jaren Jackson Jr., Bagley, Mo Bamba, Wendell Carter. I thought they were going to land one of those guys, which could hurt John Collins.
Who needs a young guy when you can get Alex Len?
Well, when they went the Trae Young route, I was kind of a little giddy about John. I got a little more giddy about John Collins. Now they moved Mike Muscala, even more giddy. I mean, I thought he'd get minutes in the above the 30-minute mark. He could see minutes now in the mid-30s, and he can play at the power forward and center spot. So it's this green lights all the way for John Collins, Dan. And, this guy, he can provide threes. I think that's there in his game. He's shown he can block shots, not an elite shot blocker, but I think that could be there. So if he makes the leap in his sophomore season, I think this could be a great fantasy guy. He's on my hype list and I'm super excited about him. But you know what, Dan? It's real early, and there's already other sites are talking about him. We're driving his draft price way up. In fact, Dan, you and I, maybe we should stop talking about him.
Well, it's done. See, that's the thing. I feel like what's done is done, and it's not necessarily us because we're like middle of the totem pole in terms of moving the needle on these things. There are big name dudes out there that have already put him out as a top 50 guy. I've seen it 2-3 different sites on Twitter. The big ones, big sites, maybe not like the biggest because we don't know what Yahoo's pre-ranks are or ESPN's pre-ranks, but the analyst sites, that terrifies me. This feels like Aaron Gordon happening all over again, where the number's going to come out and he's going to be pre-ranked like 85 or 90, and for about 2 weeks you might actually be able to get him in the 7th or 8th round, and then by early October, when most of us are starting to hunker down for our actual fantasy drafts, I think he's going to be going in that 40s range. And to me, that's like, if you take a guy where you think he could max out for the year, you put yourself in a really tough spot. Take Aaron Gordon, in fact, while we're talking about it. If we eliminate the injuries, let's forget the injuries for a moment because that put a pretty big damper on it. If we eliminate the injuries, a top 65 fantasy season is actually not that bad. He averaged 17.5 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, a steal, almost a block. His percentages were not very good, and that's sort of what weighed him down out of that top 50, top 40 territory. The problem with Aaron Gordon is that most people drafted him higher than 65, and he feels like almost I can't say a carbon copy because their games are a bit different. Gordon plays farther from the rim on the offensive side. But much like John Collins, they're both about 70% foul shooters. They both can do some stealing and shot blocking, scoring and rebounding. Gordon, as I said, better at the three-point shot. John Collins better on the field goal percent number. When you start to push that needle too far up, even a good season ends up feeling like a disappointment. And that's why I'm hoping John Collins falls into that 60s and 70s range. But what I'm seeing so far, I just don't think it's going to happen.
I think it's really interesting that you made that comparison to Aaron Gordon, because I was going to say he kind of reminds me a little bit how people were hyping Marquise Chris going into last season.
Don't do that to poor John Collins.
No, I don't think that's going to happen to John Collins. I think John Collins is going to be great. But a lot of people felt the same way about Marquise Chris. It looked like, the minutes were going to be there. The usage was going to be there. A lot of people felt like he had that all-around fantasy-friendly game, can block some shots, can shoot some threes. That's kind of that feeling I got from John Collins. So I really hope he lives up to the preseason hype that we're touting. But really interesting, Dan, last season, his average draft position in Yahoo leagues was 197.
Yeah.
And he finished 6. I mean, what?
Not even on the
bargain.
Board. Not even on the board.
Didn't even get drafted in most leagues. And so what a deal he was in your league last year. You're not going to get that kind of deal on him this season.
No, not close. I don't think. I fear, frankly, that I'm not going to end up with any John Collins, because I'm going to be sitting around thinking I want him between 65 and 85. 65 at the absolute earliest. Because to me, settling in at, number 60, number 65, that would be a really nice fantasy season. There are good players in that range. Look at last year. The 60 to 70 chunk of guys was Joe Ingles. This is per game, by the way, for 9Cat. Joe Ingles, Evan Fournier, Jason Tatum, number 63, right? Like if you got a season like Jason Tatum from John Collins this year, you'd be pretty happy about it. KCP, Aaron Gordon, Lauri Markkanen, Steven Adams, Thad Young, my boy, JJ Redick. All these guys, these are good fantasy players, but the one in that group that you look at and you're like, what a turd, is Aaron Gordon, because you drafted him 2 rounds earlier than that. And I worry that's what's going to happen with John Collins. And so I think we got to try to pour a little water. And you know what? I'm okay. Maybe I'll change my Twitter handle to like fantasy fuddy-duddy, because I'm just going to rain on parades between now and draft day. But we got to keep from hopping on the freight train. We got to get in front of the hype train, or just avoid it altogether. And John Collins feels like a guy that's really starting to make a move in that direction. Who else you got on your list, by the way, Adrian? I'm really interested to see your side.
Well, Dan, I'm a little embarrassed to tell you this next guy, because I really hate when people are like, oh, let's talk about these great fantasy players, and they bring up like the best player or like a really obvious player. But I got to tell you, Dan, every single day of the offseason that goes by, I'm buying more and more and more on Anthony Davis. And I've never been an Anthony Davis.
That's what I'm talking about.
Anthony Davis has been on my do not draft list for multiple seasons. This is the first year. Dan, when you look at the top of the when you look at the top guys that are going to go off the board, we've talked about issues that LeBron James may have, maybe not getting the minutes and the usage he got last year, maybe getting rested. Kevin Durant and Stephen Curry. Now they've added DeMarcus Cousins. We've seen Golden State rest guys. So, Russell Westbrook has his issues. Karl Anthony Towns. So I feel like Anthony Davis has really now spaced himself in a tier by himself at the top. Like, it seems like it's just a no-brainer. If you have the number 1 pick, you're going Anthony Davis no matter what. And I just wanted to kind of bring him up for that case that, he's not like, of course, he's not a sleeper or anything like that, but he is the clear number 1 guy, period, in fantasy.
Easy.
So I just kind of want to bring him up.
Easy. 100%. I'm already like well aboard the Anthony Davis freight train. But I don't think so. the thing about Anthony Davis is that despite, in my opinion, at least, from what I hear generally talking to the fantasy community, and you're one of them, Adrian. I mean, we've had shows where I basically had to talk you into wanting Anthony Davis on your team, and I feel really good about that because it means that there's still that element of fear. All the time he spends in the locker room when he's not actually on the floor with his team has put that little tickle in people, that little twinge that drives people away from AD and drives people towards someone they see as a much safer play, like a James Harden. He'll be going off the board very early. A Giannis, a Karl Anthony Towns, who, to his credit, Karl Anthony Towns is a very safe play. But Anthony Davis has actually been a pretty safe play the last 2 seasons. Now that the Pelicans are trying to push for something, trying to make the playoffs, trying to win games in advance, they're letting him go, man. They've turned him loose, and he's getting better every year. And he is, I get it. That these, like the Rudy Gobert stuff on the defensive side, he impacts plays in a certain way. I saw Anthony Davis doing things in the postseason that I've never seen, or at least not in my real analytical adult life, do in a basketball game, especially with as fast as players are nowadays. He was literally guarding a quadrant of the court. They just gave him an area, and they were like, all right, well, AD's got this whole zone. So you 4 guys, you just take care of this little sliver of the court because Anthony's got you covered. That's insane that he's that quick, that long, and that skilled. I love it. I don't think that any of their additions are going to put a damper on him. The lack of Rajon Rondo means he'll probably have to do a little bit more because, sorry, Elfrid Payton, you're not as good a facilitator. I know Rondo's not that great of a basketball player, but neither is Elfrid Payton. Anthony Davis was, and I've said this before, 30% better than the number 2 player in fantasy last year. He is like taking the number 2 player in fantasy, either on totals or a per game basis. Let's go totals because Karl Anthony Towns was number 2. Anthony Davis is like taking Karl Anthony Towns, the number 2 player, and adding Jimmy Butler to that. I mean, that's bonkers, and I don't think he's going to go number 1 overall next year. I don't think it's going to be unanimous, and I think that's going to be awesome for those of us like you and I, Adrian, that believe he should.
I didn't even want to say his name because as I said, I almost feel like it's not good fantasy. It's not good analysis to say this best player is a good guy, right? Like that's super easy to say, but I just really think it should be noted that, last year, I felt like there were 5 guys you could take number 1. Like there was no clear guy that could be number 1. You could have gone Karl Anthony Towns. You could have gone Anthony Davis, James Harden, Kevin Durant. It's like you can make a case for any one of those guys. This year, to me, it's not like that. It's Anthony Davis. So I think and every day that goes by in this offseason, it's becoming more and more clear to me that this guy needs to go number 1 in every draft. And I've never felt this way before, Dan. I've always avoided him. So I'm really hoping I get the number 1 pick in a lot of my leagues this year so I can grab that guy.
I feel like you're starting an 80s power ballad with that line. I've never felt this way before. Anthony Davis. Yeah, I look at the board, and my thought is always, is there anyone out there that could get to his level? And I think there are maybe 2 guys that could get to his level of production. Kevin Durant is one of them. If he cranks it back up to what he did 2 seasons back when he first joined the Warriors, I don't think that's going to happen. And I also don't think he's that durable here at this stage of his career. He is beginning to miss pretty consistent time with injuries on a season-to-season basis. But he has the fantasy stat set where, he can do it in blocks. He can do it in steals, scoring, threes, field goal, and free throw percent. He can do that across the board thing that Anthony Davis does without any hole in his game. And then you could probably argue that a guy like Karl Anthony Towns has the ability to get to that level, but I don't think he's going to but from what we've heard, he'd rather kind of coast a little bit, and Anthony Davis is not about coasting these days. He is gas pedal all the way down, and it's why he gets himself nicked up a little bit. But again, Karl Anthony Towns played 7 more games than AD this year, and Anthony Davis was, as we just mentioned, still 30% more relevant. His value was 30% higher than Cat over the course of this year on a totals basis, despite playing 7 fewer games. That's how much better he was than everybody else, even on a per-game basis. So, no, Adrian, I disagree with you in one thing. I don't think it's easy to pick the number one guy in fantasy. I think that this is actually a really difficult discussion because you can come at it from a lot of different angles. Someone might say, well, you know what? I still like Karl Anthony Towns because I know he's going to play 80 games. And what if AD only plays 70? Okay, then maybe they switch places a little bit. But the ceiling is just so high for one of those two guys that, to me, when you're picking first overall, you're grabbing the guy that you think has the potential to just blow everybody else out of the water, and that's got to be Anthony Davis. So I don't think you're doing something easy there. Not at all.
All right, are you ready for my next pick?
I've never been more ready.
So one guy that I like, and I've never targeted this guy heavily, and his name is Tobias Harris.
Oh, all right. Sell me on this guy.
So, when he got traded to the Clippers in that Blake Griffin deal, we saw his numbers spike, played really well, finished on the player rater as player 40 in 8 cat leagues. I think he's going to be undervalued on draft day. I think, I think he can finish there or higher because, on the Clippers, I think he's going to have a really good role as like the alpha lead guy on that team. Now, the Clippers added a lot of depth in their backcourt and front court, but they still are lacking some talent on the wing where he's at. So I think he's still going to be the number one guy. Now, Tobias Harris just turned down an extension. He's betting on himself in free agency. So he's got a lot of motivation there. Everything I'm hearing is Doc Rivers loves him. So I think he's going to be an integral part of that offense. I really like him, Dan, and I think as a guy, I see him finishing with top 40 upside. I think you'll be able to draft him much later than that.
Yeah, he was, by all accounts, right around a top 40 guy in his time with the Clippers. So I think you're making a very wise decision with a guy who doesn't get a ton of publicity. His full season, he played 80 games this year, which is awesome, between Detroit and LA. 18.5 points, 2.3 3-pointers, 5.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, a steal, and half a block. He's not big on the defensive end, which, that does stick in my craw a little bit. But 46% from the field with a nice chunk of threes. That's a pretty good combo. 83% at the foul line, and he just never turns the ball over. Yeah, he feels like a guy that could... It's just like he has a boring fantasy game, and so people tend to overlook him a little bit. But you're right. There really isn't anything challenging him. Is anybody out there going to try to argue that Danilo Gallinari is going to play enough games this year to knock Tobias Harris down? That's a terrible wager to make, right? I mean, the over-under on Gallo games played is probably like 52.5, and I'd probably bet the under. So where would you look to try to draft Tobias? If you could get him at 50, would you do it, or are you shooting for more like 55 or 60?
Yeah, I'm hoping more like 55 or 60, but let's see how things look coming into draft season. Let's see, what his average draft position is. Let's see what his pre-rank is. We'll kind of get a better idea there, but I'm really hoping to get him right around that range, like 55, 60.
What's another good thing about Tobias is he really doesn't do anything terribly. He doesn't hurt you anywhere.
Yeah, but you know what? I think you made a really good point. Not a big defensive stat guy. Also, not a super high assist guy. But, my strategy, Dan, really...
yeah, you're loading up,
on
man.
the point guards and centers. So that's why I'm hoping at about 55, 60. I already got my assists and blocks locked up. So he's like that perfect wing guy to go after right there. I think he's going to be great.
Yeah, he's a nice one to grab. actually for the very reasons that you were mentioning, because you don't then have to spend an early pick on a small forward type, and you can get Tobias, who he's really like, he's a poor man's early rounder in every respect, because he's above average in scoring, he's above average in threes, he's above average in turnovers, slightly above average in field goal percent and free throws, and ever so slightly above average in rebounding and steals. Like, he's the perfect fit on any fantasy team because he's a quiet all-around producer. That's a nice one. And I think but I don't think he fits the hype train, though. I think he's like an anti-hyper because, he played really well with the Clippers, but was anybody really paying attention to him? I don't think he's going to go that early this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think he will be very undervalued on draft day. I think he could easily fly under the radar. So, if you can get him that late, like in the 60 range, and if he finishes as a top 40 guy, you're sitting pretty.
All right, here's an important follow-up on that same question, though. Where would you not take him? Like, at what point is he priced out for you?
I can't take him. I can't take him before the 5th round. There's no way.
Okay, so are you talking 10 team there? So like before pick 51 or 41? Yeah. I guess it'd be 41, wouldn't it?
Yeah, you know what? You're right. That's
48.
That's like 10 team in 12th. I couldn't take him before the 4th round. It's just, I don't know. There's just guys with higher upside that I'm hoping I can land.
Yeah, 45 for me. I wouldn't touch him before 45. It's just there's too many things where, what if Gallo plays 60 games, that like those little things wouldn't knock him off the map, but they could knock him from 40 to like 50. And so, you look for a guy like that around 45, and that's fine. Anything he falls beyond that, to me, is fairly useful. All right, who's next?
Okay, so next up, a guy that I love. This might be more of like a personal thing for me. I'm just a big fan of him.
The Adrian Benjamin's all-hype team.
Yeah, I really love Donovan Mitchell, man. I enjoyed watching him so much last season, and I just want him on all my fantasy teams.
He's easy to root for.
Yeah. This guy finished number 35 in 8-cat leagues, got a really late start because I don't even think he was starting on the Jazz at the start of the season. So, he didn't come out of the gate at a full sprint. I think this year he's going to come out hot. Like, he's going to just, just build on what he did in that amazing rookie season. And, unfortunately, his draft price is going to be pretty high. So it's going to be tough to get a lot of value out of his draft price because it will be so high. But I just really love Donovan Mitchell. If I can get him at the end of the 2nd round, beginning of 3rd round, I think I'd be pretty happy.
Oh, see, that one, I think this is hype train stuff now, right? Because Donovan Mitchell he has the superstar glow with a couple of fantasy holes in his game. He ended up as the number 54 guy, by the way, in 9-cat format, which, not quite as stunning. He did have almost 3 turnovers per game, and that knocked him down a couple of pegs. You're right. He got off to a slow start this year, and that put a little bit of a damper on things as well. When things picked up for Donovan Mitchell, it actually didn't fix his fantasy value. And it's sort of a weird little, I don't know, what do you even call this? Like a strange, unexpected caveat. Over the last 3 months of this most recent NBA campaign, when everybody was talking about what Donovan Mitchell was doing on the basketball court, he was averaging 22 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.5 steals, 2.5 3-pointers per game. Those numbers sound massive. He was the number 68 player in 9-category format over that stretch because he averaged 0.2 blocks per game, so basically 0. He was taking 19 shots a night and making only 43% of them. he was shooting a very weird 77 and change % at the free throw line, which is actually a slight negative, and almost 3 turnovers per game. So he had this quiet 4 categories that were actually kind of weighing him down in 9-cat formats. And so I'm actually, and God, I'm so with you on how much I love watching Donovan Mitchell. He's a wizard. He has those weird Kyrie moves around the rim where he finds a way to get it up off the glass around really big guys. And it's so cool. He's so entertaining. But I do think he's going to be a bit overhyped. And so that, like you said, end of second, right? I already forgot where you put him. I think I end up with very few shares of Donovan Mitchell because he's a guy I'm targeting more towards 45 or 50 this year in 9-cat format. And I'm betting he goes much closer to what you were talking about.
One other really interesting thing to note about Donovan Mitchell is the Utah Jazz kind of had a strange offseason in that they didn't make a lot of changes. They almost have the exact same rotation that they had last year. Ricky Rubio, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, Derek Favors they brought back, Rudy Gobert. I mean, it's almost the exact same team. So I like that, they didn't bring in any superstar there to take anything away from Donovan Mitchell. It's still going to be his show, and he's playing with all these guys he's familiar with. So I kind of like them not really changing much in the offseason, I think almost helps him.
Yeah, I agree. Consistency is definitely a good thing, and I think they're going to pile up wins because of it. I mean, that's going to be great for them. That's a sports betting angle, by the way. You just brought up a really good topic for a future show. Teams that have consistency season over season, playing against teams that have made a bunch of offseason moves, they tend to have a big leg up, even if, from a talent perspective, they might be pretty well matched, but the one that's played together longer usually throttles the other guy early in the season. So we'll talk about that from the sports betting angle, but the fantasy stuff does worry me a little bit, right? Can he fix the field goal percentage thing? Is he ever going to be a high volume better number there? Can the free throw number get up where it really ought to be for someone of his ability and statistical? I know over the season he was like about an 80%er, but he was worse than that late in the season for whatever reason. I don't think he's ever going to block shots. I don't think he's ever really going to rebound all that much. And if Rubio's healthy, his assists should be a little bit lower. So I don't know with him. Especially in 9-cat, he's a little bit turnover prone. 8-cat, you could add around to it for sure. But 9-cat, he could end up sitting in that 40 to 45 range this year, and I think people are going to be a little bit irritated by it. So I'm actually I'm off the Donovan Mitchell fantasy hype train. This is fun. I like when you and I disagree a little bit.
Yeah, and like I said to start, it's maybe more of like the fanboy in me leaning Donovan Mitchell here.
You got a Spider Mitchell fathead on your wall?
You know what? I'm thinking of wearing a Donovan Mitchell jersey to my home league draft, but like putting it under my shirt. And then when it goes up, like when I go up to the board to make my pick, take my shirt off and show my Donovan Mitchell jersey. And then here's my pick.
Listen, you gotta go whole hog on this thing, and you need to get the Hollywood Hulk Hogan tearaway outer shirt. I need you striding up to that board, ripping off whatever garment you had on to reveal the Spider Mitchell jersey underneath. When you started that sentence, by the way, I thought you were going to say like wedding or like my cousin's bar mitzvah or something. Just roll in a Donovan Mitchell jersey. That would definitely be Twitter worthy at the very least. Reminder, by the way, you can follow us on Twitter again at Dan Besbris and at Adrian Benjamins. You want to do one more and then put a pin in it?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
All right. Who you got?
So one guy I'll bring up, and I talk about this guy all the time. He's getting a ton of hype, and this is the all hype team. So might as well bring him up again. Jared Allen, center for the Nets. I think this guy's going to be great this season. And another guy I'm kind of hoping might be undervalued or might maybe fly under the radar. I don't know, maybe not. But, a real roller coaster in the offseason because the Nets for a day or two, they had Dwight Howard and we thought that Jared Allen hype train was going to come to a screeching halt. And
We
then
need to talk
luckily-
about Dwight, by the way, before this show is done. But please continue.
So, luckily Dwight Howard did not end up on the Nets, and now it's full steam ahead for the Jared Allen hype train. So I really like this guy. One of the things I love about him is he doesn't hurt you from the free throw line. So I like that. A guy that can, I'd like to see him block a little bit more. But I think that he can, and I hope he improves there. And I really like him. Doesn't have much competition. They did add Ed Davis, who is a really nice reality player and who also does at times have nice fantasy value too. So, they also did add Kenneth Faried. So, they did add some depth in that front court, but I think Jared Allen is the cream of the crop of that front court, and I think he's going to be the guy to own there. One last thing. I really like the Nets' pace of offense for fantasy. They usually run a really fast, fantasy-friendly pace, so I really hope that they keep that up again this season.
Yeah, if you're, that's a good one. Jared Allen is a really good one to bring up, and I think he's a nice one to put in contrast to John Collins, who we talked about earlier in the podcast, because they're both kind of the up-and-coming big man, and they were talked about in similar breaths, I thought, during last fantasy season, right? Didn't you feel like you heard both of those guys come up kind of in the same vein?
Yes, and both guys were rookies, so maybe they kind of had that in common. Kind of like similar roles on their team, too. So.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm seeing more John Collins hype so far this offseason than Jared Allen. And I don't know if it's because the Nets brought in Ed Davis or the Dwight Howard stuff. People started to think that other centers were out there were going to lose their playing time. But it does seem like the Nets have left room open for him. And so I think, and obviously only time will tell, but it feels like, at least right now, you'll be able to get Jared Allen at an okay price at the very worst. There's a possibility that he becomes a pretty good draft day value. I don't think Kenneth Faried is going to play a whole lot out there. I think they'll try to move him or just let that contract expire. I mean, the other options are limited, right? Isn't it mostly just Ed Davis and Jared Allen at this point? Are we forgetting anybody? Someone might pop up, I guess, but I feel like that was it.
If they wanted to play small ball, maybe they can play Rondé Hollis-Jefferson, but I've never really seen them do that in the past.
Yeah.
They do have Jared Dudley on the roster, but he's not really a center. So yeah, that's about it. It's really Ed Davis and Kenneth Faried, and I just think Jared Allen's the guy there. He should be getting great minutes. The usage should be there. That really friendly offense should really help him out. So I think the sky's the limit for this guy.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I like his upside. He showed some pretty cool stuff late in the fantasy season last year, like better footwork, better presence on the court than I expected. And when he got 24 minutes per game over the last, I think it was about the last 30 games of the year, he was a top 80 guy, which that's 10 points and 6 rebounds, by the way. That's not exactly impressive numbers in the popcorn stuff. 0.4 steals, 1.8 blocks per game, 60% from the field, and 79% at the free throw line. There's a really nice ceiling for this kid if they play him 27, 28 minutes a game. You're looking at a potential top 60, top 65 kind of guy, and I'm thinking you'll be able to get him later than that. Like, I don't think that his ceiling is much lower than John Collins, and you're hearing John Collins, get him at 45. With Jared Allen, I don't think you're hearing anybody saying before 75, which, yeah, I don't know that I would take him before 75, but that also means that it's not going to push his ADP the way that John Collins would. I think I'll end up with some Jared Allen shares this year, but probably not many John Collins shares. And in fact, by the way, as a side note, I traded away Jared Allen in a keeper league because the other guy was with me on that same notion. It was like, look, I'm making a push to try to win this season, which I did. Here's a guy that I think is going to be awesome next year, and you can keep him at basically no price at all. He's a terrific value. I love it. He's a hype train guy, Adrian, that you brought up. That I think the hype is going to be low enough that we can steal one here. And now, can we spend the last 75 seconds of the show laughing at Dwight Howard? Yeah.
Did you hear Dwight Howard says he wants to play 8 more years?
8 more years.
And he wants to retire as a Washington Wizard.
Did you see that? Yes, I did see that, by the way. And did you see that someone went through his old quotes and put together a Twitter collage of every time Dwight Howard has said he wants to retire with a team, and he's done it with each of his last 4 teams? It is... I mean, it is like you cannot. This is a tasty dish, Adrian. This is a very tasty dish. 8 more seasons. Dwight Howard, by the way, is almost 33. I don't think I see this guy playing into his 40s, and he just blows up every team he goes to. I mean, he played 8 years, I think, 8 or 9 years with Orlando, and then 1 year with the Lakers, 3 with the Rockets, 1 with Atlanta, 1 with Charlotte. He's off to Washington. Dwight. Everyone has caught on to your shtick, man. It's not working anymore. Wizards going to be terrible this year. Dwight Howard's going to destroy that team.
I was really disappointed when he joined the Wizards because the Wizards are one of my favorite teams to target and to watch for fantasy. They run such a great pace for fantasy. They have so many great fantasy assets. And as you mentioned, everywhere Dwight Howard goes, he ruins the value of players on whatever team he ends up. And I'm really scared of what this is going to mean for guys like Otto Porter, Markieff Morris, maybe even Bradley Beal. I mean, we got to expect all of their rebounds to go down. He's going to clog the lane. He's going to slow it down. And I really hope that he doesn't hurt these other guys' value too badly.
Oh, he's going to kill Porter and Markieff Morris. Their value is going to take hits like... they're obviously different players than a guy like Marvin Williams or Michael Kidd-Gilchrist in Charlotte. They have different fantasy games, but any part of your game that relies on rebounding or getting near the bucket, field goal percent, that also tends to take a hit for some of these guys. I think John Wall survives this because I do think you'll see some assists going to Dwight Howard, but I saw some Washington Wizards fans trying to delude themselves into thinking that Dwight Howard would start to run a pick and roll now at his age 33 season. Guys, as a Laker fan, please, let me just warn you, it's not going to happen. If he wouldn't do it with Steve Nash, who, one of the greatest pick and roll point guards of all time, he's not going to do it for your Washington Wizards. This is a disaster. The Lakers might have the funniest, the most ridiculous locker room in the NBA, but I think the Wizards are going to underachieve worse than whatever happens with LA because LeBron conquers all, and the Wizards just don't have a guy like that on their team. So, sorry, Washington. That's a rough one. This was all the Dan and Adrian hype. What did I call it? The All NBA hype first team. I may have butchered that name for the show. We found some good ones, Adrian. Let's go back and do a quick recap here. John Collins, for me, I am fading that hype train. Are you backing it or fading it?
I'm all aboard as long as I can get him like 5th round or later.
Yeah, I want 75 or later on that, and I know it's not going to happen. Jared Allen, for me, I would take him like basically 80 or later, and I do think that's doable, so I'm backing that hype train. What about you?
Yes, I agree with that spot, and I am all aboard the Jared Allen hype train.
All right, who else we got? You've got the list in front of you.
Anthony Davis. I'm number 1 pick. I'm taking Anthony Davis. I never thought I would say that, Dan.
Yeah, I might go back and insert a giant steam engine sound effect in this part of the podcast. All aboard, man, for both of us. Who else? What else did we talk about?
The last 2 guys we talked on, Tobias Harris, I think it's all green lights for Tobias Harris. I think he's going to have a great season. I think you can get a good price on him on draft day. Are you in on him too, Dan?
Yeah, I'm quietly on that train. That's the hype train where I'm like, I went up to the counter and I purchased the ticket with my credit card and I showed it to the the guy that punches the ticket on the train, but I very quietly loaded my luggage into the overhead compartment and went about my business, much the way that Tobias Harris does. I think I would look to try to draft him 50 or later.
And last
nine
guy,
cat,
I know you're not on this train. I know you don't want to jump on this train.
Oh, Donovan.
Donovan Mitchell.
That's right. I almost forgot about that one. Yeah, I am. I'm off that hype train. I think the train has gone too far. It's past my station. I don't even know where. Like I said, I think I'd draft him. After 40, closer to 50, and I don't. There's almost no chance he falls that far with the amazing stuff that he did towards the end of last year. And I know you were taking, but you're talking 8-cat for him. I forgot already when you said you'd be targeting him in 8-cat.
Yes, and I'm trying to figure out in my mind how from here to the start of the season I can change your mind, and I need him to have a huge preseason and off season. I need him to be gain 30 pounds of muscle and just go crazy, muscle watch crazy and everything, so I can get you aboard the Donovan Mitchell hype train.
he could put on as much muscle as that'd be weird looking. He'd look like Mike Bibby. He'd look like new.
Yeah, that wouldn't work actually, huh?
On a scale from 1 to 10, I give Mike Bibby like a 10.5 on ridiculous looking nowadays.
You know what? He was one of my favorite players to watch back in the day when he was with the Sacramento Kings. Because I'm a little guy, I always loved watching these little point guards, and he was one of the guys I really enjoyed watching.
Yeah, but now he's like he's at like somebody wronged my dog buff at this point. That's crazy looking.
See him ripped. He is so ripped.
It's gross.
And to see him that big right now, it just blows my mind, Dan.
It's gross. Kermit the Frog should not have that many muscles. He's Adrian Benjamins. I am Dan Besbris. This is Fantasy NBA Today. Hope you enjoyed the hype show. I've already forgotten what our schedule's looking like. I think I'm with Neil tomorrow. Adrian, you and Neil will be on the Thursday pod, and then you guys are stuck with me talking about God knows what by myself on Friday. That's the way the rest of the week looks here on Fantasy NBA Today. Again, you can follow us on Twitter. If you can spell our names, you can find us, or follow at HoopBallFantasy. We tag ourselves when the show goes out, so you can find us that way as well, or just simply go to hoop-ball.com for all of your fantasy NBA needs. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.